guys, today we're going to be learning about the circular flow model. In the last lesson we talked about models and we talked about 3 different kinds of models. We talked about the tabular model or the schedule, we talked about the line graph, and then lastly we talked about the production possibilities curve or the PPC. In this lesson we're going to look at another model that's a little more detailed, and it's called the circular flow model. And the circular flow model is a tool of macroeconomics. Remember we talked about microeconomics versus macroeconomics. Microeconomics would be things like individual income or individual households or individual businesses. Macroeconomics would have to do with larger scale things like unemployment or the national debt or trade between countries, things like that. So this circular flow model has to do with macroeconomics because it's a visual explanation of how a complete national economic system works. The whole economic system of a nation. That's why it's called it's used in macroeconomics. All right. The 2 basic elements of the circular flow model is business firms, which we will represent by this symbol, and households, which we'll represent by this symbol. So I'll put these in here. Business firms and households. Okay? All right, and then up at the top, you notice that we have things going from households to business firms and from business firms to households. So we're gonna go ahead and talk through those and label them. The first one that we have is gross domestic product, or GDP. And you'll remember GDP, we talked about it a lot in cultural geography, the GDP of different countries. And what the GDP is, or the gross domestic product, is a total of all of the goods and services that businesses give to household or sell. All the goods and services that a business sells, and they sell them to households or to individual people, all right? So all the goods and services that business firms sell that's called the GDP, or gross domestic product. All right, GDP as well. The total of all the goods and services that businesses sell to households. Now, this isn't just one business. This isn't just like one lawn care business or something like that. This is all of the businesses together. If you would add all of the goods and services that all of the businesses offer together, you would get GDP. That's gross domestic product, okay? All right, next thing that we have to label is consumption expenditures. This is the total that all the households spend on goods and services. So GDP is all the goods and services that businesses are selling. Consumption expenditures is all of the total of all the money that the household spends on goods and services. Okay, so this one is consumption expenditures. All right, next up we have factors of production. This is all of the resources that are necessary for businesses to produce goods and services. So for example, businesses need things like money, they need employees, they need materials, things like that. This is all the things that business firms need in order to produce goods and services. And these are called factors of production. And they get these factors of production from households. People invest in business firms, that gives them money. People go to work for business firms, that gives them employees, different things like that. So all of the goods and resources that are necessary for a business to work comes from the household, and these are called factors of production. Okay, households provide the factors of production, just like we mentioned. And so now is what we're gonna do is kind of go through a list. I'm gonna give you a brief list and you'll write a little bit more detailed list in class, but we'll write a list of the factors of production. Now, keep in mind, these are things that come from households. Okay, the first one we have is land. Now, this isn't just like land as in ground, right? But it actually goes a little bit deeper than this. Land is considered all of the natural resources that go into production. So it would include things like ground, but it would also include things like animal products, materials that are mined, crops, different things like that. That would all be included in land, okay? Second thing that goes into the factors of production is labor. Labor is all the human effort that goes into the creation of goods and services. This can be physical labor, but it can also be mental work, mental labor. And this again would come from households. Next up we have capital. Capital is goods that are used to produce other goods. There's two types of capital, financial capital and real capital. Financial capital and real capital. Financial capital is all the money that the household loans directly to business firms. This could be by buying stocks, by investing in the business, and that would be considered financial capital. Real capital, on the other hand, is all the tools that are used to produce goods and services. So this could be things like a tractor would be real capital for a farmer, for a farming business, things like that. Okay, and last but certainly not least, actually last but most important, is entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is the activity of creatively combining natural resources, human labor, and capital in unique ways to develop new useful goods and services. All right? It's the most important factor of production, and discouraging entrepreneurship can cause a lot of damage to a nation's economy. Okay, so factors of production are things that we get from households that go toward business firms. Now, what goes from business firms to households? Well, that's something we call factor costs. And that's something that we'll list here as well. Factor costs, payments that business firms make in exchange for the 4 factors of production. So households give them factors of production, business firms give the household these factor costs. All right, first one is rent. This is all the payments for the use of an owner's property. So a lot of business firms are on ground that is leased or things like that. And rent is all the payments for the use of an owner's property. That's something that would go back to households. And then we have wages. All the payments for labor used to produce goods or services. This could be just like your hourly wage or your salary, as well as benefits you receive. Maybe you receive insurance through your work, or like dental insurance or medical benefits, different things like that. This would all be included in wages, okay? Interest. Interest is the payments that business firms make on borrowed money. Just like if you would borrow money from the bank, you would pay interest on it. All right, interest, the payments business firms make on borrowed money. And then we have profits. Profit is the difference between revenues received from the sale of a product and the cost of labor, capital, and I have the capital that went into production, but I don't think that's right. Okay. Profit is the difference between the revenues received from the sale of a product and the cost of the labor, land, and capital that went into its production. All right. Okay, so all of these things are going back to households, and they're called they're called factor costs. All right. Okay, this is important for you guys to memorize. You need to know how to write this out, which one goes from households to business firms and vice versa, which ones are on the top, on the bottom, things like that. This is the simplest form of the circular flow model, and it's a very simple representation of how an economic system operates. And in the next lesson, we will add on to this and get a little more detailed even. Okay, thanks guys.